What's up, my know-it-alls? Good morning. Well, it's time for another review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. This time, it's episode 6. Specifically, the title is Lost in Translation. Alright, man, before we get into it though, do me a favor, like and subscribe to the video. It really helps the channel grow, and let people know that you're a part of the Know-It-All Nation. I really appreciate every single thing you guys do to support the channel. It helps us so much and makes me just feel so fueled and ready to keep going. But for right now, here we go. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 6, Lost in Translation. So this is actually a very interesting episode. You get a chance, again, like they've been doing all season, you're highlighting one crew member, or at least taking the time to character develop. Now, I think they've been doing a fantastic job, but now we're looking at Uhura, Ensign Uhura specifically. What's really interesting about this entire thing is you get a chance to really see her cognitive, but also her reasoning abilities. The ability for her to actually take a look and see, okay, well, this is what's going on, and it's more than just being the communications officer. It's about being alert and being very aware. Let's go ahead and get into it. So the episode starts with the Enterprise is on a routine mission. I say routine, but the Enterprise has been brought to this very interesting deuterium field. So it's like almost like a nebular gas giant, but deuterium is essentially a type of fuel that the Federation uses. And by fuel, I mean so everyone knows about the nacelles. The nacelles have those big red things in front known as I've always called them the Bussard collectors, but I guess they're called the Bussard collectors. And so the Bussard collectors, generally speaking, they pull in various forms of radiation from space and see what they can do. Sometimes you can use it just for sensors. Sometimes you can use it for actually pulling in and collecting deuterium to help to use in the warp core reaction, specifically the injectors. So it literally is like fuel into the engine. So like your gas line. Anyway, sorry. Very technical tangent. Forgive me for that. What you find out is Pike, he's got this nice new cool badge. He has been named Fleet Captain. It's literally the station, the Farragut, and the Enterprise. So he's Fleet Captain of 2 ships and the station itself. I guess the station's been having trouble getting online. It should have been online like 6 months prior. And so they sent them there, and specifically what they wanted was the code hard efficiency of a specific number 1. Then how it doesn't hurt that she's got Pelia, who is a hundreds of years old engineer, it's a cool little situation. So and that's actually what you end up with. You end up with 2 plots that are happening. One is the Uhura plot we know about with the hallucinations and whatnot. And the other one is this interesting conversation that's happening between Pelia and number 1. Pike is in the process of pontificating, as he will do, and he happens to catch Uhura asleep at the wheel. She hadn't been getting much sleep. Both her duty roster shows that she's super been busy, but also at the same time, she's just really been working hard at this whole thing, and there's a lot going on to try to coordinate the efforts of all of the 2 ships, the Farragut, the Enterprise, and of course the station itself. What does Uhura do? She overworks herself, of course, and begins to she's having issues. She's having trouble sleeping. She begins to hear a sound. It's a very specific sound. And she hears it, and she tries to play it, and Pike's like, well, let me hear the recording. There is none. So that's her first inclination that there's something more happening with her than was originally, than we may have thought. So then she wants to calibrate some things, and she goes to the nacelles. I guess the communications antenna array system goes, the wiring goes through the nacelles, and she's watching an old video of Hemmer, who we, by the way, get in this episode. So we get, even though it's Hemmer in the recording, it's not. This isn't reused footage. You actually get the actor back, and I thought that was really cool to see him again in that role. Also, some interesting callbacks to him throughout the episode. One of the things that they do is Pelia shows up, and she's like, "What are you doing up here?" And she's like, "Well, I had some issues in the past, and I used to ask for these adjustments so often that Hammer finally just said, 'Let me train you how to do it,' and they did a recording." So that's what she does, and that's her first inclination to what's happening on that side. And then so she goes on the turbolift, and while she's on the turbolift, she sees Zombie Hemmer right after hearing the sound. She hears the sound, then, and I mean Zombie, it's rough. Like, he looks rough. And so She's immediately freaked out. We cut to her in sickbay. And Mbenga's explaining to her she has some form, because she was in the nacelle's room, she has a slight form of deuterium poisoning. Deuterium poisoning can cause hallucinations. Couple that with her lack of sleep, and he catches that on the monitors as well. And what you end up with is the realization that she's exhausted. And he basically says she can't work. He's like, you're done for now. Until I know you've gotten some rest, you're off duty. And which she hates. So then we cut back to the station, and you see that they're trying to get some things working. Una's getting frustrated. Pelia is sort of butting heads with her, not because she doesn't respect her, but because Pelia has other not motivations but priorities in terms of how to get the thing up and running. And Una's really trying to flex hard on her, which is a little uncharacteristic of Una. But so you find out a little bit why later. So then Uhura wakes up, and she's got this really cool. She's got this hair thing on, and I'm sitting here. I love whenever they allow the characters to show their culture. I love that. I think it's one of those features that I sit here and go, that's so cool that we're now at this stage able to go deeper than just surface. It's more than just skin color or ethnicity. It's much more about, hey, here is a cultural difference with this person. And we used to take the time with Vulcans and other people and whatnot. Shout out to the Three-Finger Tellurite in the bar. This episode again, toward the end, I'll call him back out again. But when she gets up in the middle of she gets up and she hears, she can't sleep, and she hears the sound, and then she stands up and she's in a large green field outside, and she's like, oh, this isn't normal and this isn't right. And so what ends up happening is she's realizing more and more that it's whatever the thing is, it's getting worse. So then we cut to the transporter room, and a certain Sam Kirk is greeting his brother, and we get to see Lieutenant James Kirk, and it's fun, and they go to the bar and they get to walk around, and then you get this interesting discussion about their past. Now, what's great is we've always known a little bit about their relationship from the original series as well as some B canon books, but at the end of the day, seeing them together and this back and forth, it's very brotherly. I have my own brother and I love him to death, but there are times that we've sort of pecked at each other about, what are you doing? What am I doing? What's going on? Anyways, it's very interesting to see the relationship between the Kirk brothers, only to find out that James Kirk has been promoted to first officer of the Farragut, youngest first officer in the fleet. And who was the youngest first officer in the fleet before him? One George Kirk of the Kelvin. And I thought that was so interesting that they took the opportunity to sort of name drop the Kelvin, name drop George. By the way, this has nothing to do with the Kelvin timeline. This has everything to do with the original. See, because in the original series, James Kirk and his brother were always striving for their father's approval because he had been such a success in Starfleet. So it's one of those things where I'm gonna call him what it is. Sam's being a little bit of a oh yeah, he's like the childish brother who's like, well, there you are, you're making me look bad. You're over here trying to follow, Dad has an idea of success and it looks an awful lot like what you like, an awful lot like you. And I'm like, dude, can you be more petty? And at the end of the day, what Sam's doing, you also find out Sam's first name is George, which we've known, but I never made the connection that he was named after his father. So essentially, Sam Kirk is a junior, and so it's pretty interesting. Moving on. We cut to an interest because Sam walks away. So Sam walks away, sort of pouty, and James is left there. And they cut to there's a quick cut in with Una where you find it's more of that Una and Pelia butting heads. But then we cut to a weird sort of stuck in the middle coda piece that I don't know if it belonged in this episode, but I guess it's fine. And it's Spock and Chapel who are playing three-dimensional chess. Chapel's losing, or at the very least being condescended to, not that Spock intends to. But you find out that essentially Spock is letting her know, listen, there are rules and regulations, things we got to do. And she's like, I don't know if I want to go tell, because fraternization requires you to inform that that's happening. And she's like, but if we say something, it's then official. Like, it's an actual thing at that point. And Spock's like, and if you don't she uses the example of Schrodinger's cat. At any given point, it is both true that the cat is alive and dead at the same time. It's a long thing. Big Bang Theory exhaustively taught us all about it. So then we come to Uhura, who goes down to the bar, and she's trying to talk to them a little bit about what she thinks might be going on. And she essentially is like, look, I understand nobody gets it. Everybody thinks I'm crazy or tired. And she goes to the bar to sit down, and that's when this is the meet cute of Uhura and Kirk. First time they encounter one another. And Uhura's literally like, look, I'm not looking to be hit on. And he's like, wait. And Kirk makes the assumption, oh, Sam does this. He hits on you guys. Like, Kirk's kind of like has to apologetically be like, yeah, okay. And he's not, he didn't try to hit on La'an, he didn't try to hit on Uhura. He's basically just being himself, which is charming. And so Uhura, she gets up to leave, and she's out in the hall, and she hears the sound again. And she has another hallucination. This time, it's bodies strewn across the different hall. And then she turns, and you see another her, with a knife who tries to attack her. So she fights it out and punches the other her, only to wake up, and she punched Kirk. And he's like, I told you, I'm not trying to hit on you. And so rather than going to sickbay and having to explain why she struck a superior officer, they go back to her quarters. She has a dermal regenerator and ultimately wants to make sure that he's okay. So what happens is he's like, look, I've been through crazy stuff before. I believe you. Now Kirk is helping Uhura investigate. Very cool. We then cut back to the station. At the station, they uncover a saboteur. Specifically, there's this guy they encounter. His name is, I think he's Lieutenant Ramon, is what his name is. He's also hearing the sound and going crazy like Uhura. And his whole thing is he's like, this isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't real. He's trying to tell himself stuff isn't real. And what you start to understand is this scenario gets so dangerous because you don't know what's real. You don't know if what you're encountering right this moment is reality or not. And I think that's huge. It's a huge part of this whole thing. So they bring him back to the Enterprise, and Uhura has his medical scan and her information, and Kirk says, look, I'll take the information and I'll get over to the Farragut, get some more details. Ramon, they scan, he's way worse off than she is, to the point that he almost can't communicate because the language centers of his brain have been fried. So then Uhura goes back to rushes up to the bridge with a red alert, and as they're sitting there, he's like, the screen starts to crack and explodes out, and everyone is blown out except her. That's when she wakes up. And Pike's like, I thought you were on leave. And she's like, yeah, it's getting worse. So she sits down with Pike to talk, and that's when Kirk shows up. And this is when Kirk officially meets Pike. Up until this point, the only time they've met is in the alternate future when Kirk is the captain of the Farragut. So that's an interesting. So now we get to see their meet cute, if you will, of how they got to meet. Meanwhile, Kirk takes her to they go to sickbay. Ramon has escaped. Ramon not only escapes, he's starting to sabotage the ship. There's a reason for that. So as they go through the ship and she eventually finds him in the same nacelle place. He's trying to disable something. And so as he's sabotaging a portion of the ship, Kirk shows up and it does an emergency transport. The entire area blows out of the ship. Dude is dead. There's this weird moment where La'an passes Kirk in the hall. He's waiting, and they sort of have this, will they talk, won't they talk? Because she's still reeling from her experiences. Again, a lot of things peppered throughout the episode that for an episodic series felt very, we're trying to member bury you already from 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago or whatever. So it was a little, it was jarring, but not distracting, if that makes sense. Kirk helps Uhura figure out some things. And as they're talking through what's going on, and she explains, because he's explain to me what you've seen, this and that, and she gets into a little bit about her family, and she talks about the shuttle accident that took her parents from her and whatnot. And eventually you get to this realization where she starts to understand we we need someone's help because I think someone might be trying to communicate with us based on certain information. She's like, the scans are specifically for the communication centers of the brain. What if we're thinking about this whole thing wrong? And this is what Star Trek does really well. It shows you a scenario that seems cut and dry and then says, now let's flip it. It's very much like Doctor Who in that respect, where Doctor Who will show you something that looks supernatural, and then he'll give you this wonderfully scientific alien reason, and you go, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, it's great. So same thing. You sit here and you go, okay, maybe she's not hallucinating, maybe it's something else. And then they piece together, they're trying to communicate. And Kirk's like, well, what are they communicating? And because as they talked, they went and they go see Sam. Sam's a xenobiologist, so he's able to kind of say, okay, hypothetically speaking, what is the scenario hypothetically? And she lays it out for him, and he goes, yeah, in a hypothetical world, they could be trying to communicate. What are they trying to communicate? Uhura begins. This is when I was talking about at the very, very beginning. She starts. She uses her communications and understanding, and really trying to work through the puzzle of this. And I loved watching her uncover this thing because it's so. You're sitting here going, oh my gosh, she's like, it's like a sort of an auditory communication Sherlock Holmes. And so she begins talking through the whole scenario, and you realize at every step, it's been about. Whatever the aliens are, they're in trouble. And then they come to the conclusion, well, what if because they're pulling them in, what if in the process of pulling them in and refining them, they're actually killing them? And that's figuratively everything being shown. Uhura shouts up to the main deck and is like, we gotta stop. And he's like, I already brought it online. We cut to them up on the bridge, and as soon as they arrive on the bridge, she's like, we have to do this whole thing. And Pike at one point is like, walk me through this. And she explains it, and he's like, are you certain? And now the zombie Hemmer is there, but he's not there attacking her. He's there as the point of communication with her. And so she's like, yes, I'm absolutely certain. And he goes, well, what do we need to do? She's like, you need to evacuate everybody, and as soon as you evacuate everybody, we need to destroy the station. And he's like, okay, all right, everybody do it. I mean, this is what I love is the trust that you're building in your people and the ability to them to go, okay, Captain, this is what's happening. And he's like, okay, then let's do that. Let's go there. And they do. And so what you get is this really interesting moment where they evacuate the station, and it's actually on the shuttle away from the station because they all have these escape things. That's when That's when Una and Pelia have their moment, but I'll get to that in a second. As soon as the station is destroyed, Pike's like, is everything better? Zombie Hemmer is now regular Hemmer again. So it's wonderful again to see the actor in that role doing this thing. I'm excited and encouraged just to see him again because he was such a cool part of her life and was so significant. And she's like, yeah, it's good. And so this is when you finally cut back. Now we cut back to Pelia and Una on the shuttle, and Pelia and Una have a moment where Una's like, you gave me a C and this and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I understand. And if you want to keep saying that that's the reason why, fine, I won't argue with you. And she goes, but I think the truth is this whole scenario helped. You lost your friend Hemmer. I show up replacing him, and every time you see me you get frustrated and angry. She's like, you don't need to this and that, and it's a good moment. It's a good come to Jesus moment in terms of how these two communicate. Also, think about it. You have Una, who potentially could live for centuries herself as an Illyrian with her genetic modifications, just like her lawyer friend had lived for a good long time. And you have Pelia, who is long-lived, a long-lived species. So, again, very interesting roles that they're laying out. I think that I love the story beats, but the episode felt a little bit like a mess in terms of all the things they kept trying to member bury us with. I'm hoping all of this is building to something, which I know it's not supposed to because it's episodic. I do know that next week is the brand new episode of Strange New Worlds where I believe we're going to get our crossover. So next week will be the crossover. I'll see if I can shake, rattle, and roll Mrs. Know-It-All and Baby Know-It-All to help join me for that one because it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm ready for it, and so I hope you are too. So there you go. Now you know, and if knowing is half the battle, you are halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. So what's the know-it-all index rating for this week? I'm going to go ahead and give this one a solid 8.5. I feel like it was a good episode. A little messy in some bits, but the parts that hit well. I love seeing Uhura come into this is who I am as a professional, and she's sort of earning and building the love, trust, and respect of Kirk, which will come in the future. Before I miss it, there's also that moment when Spock joins Uhura and Kirk at the very, very end. It's awesome because it's their meet cute. So essentially they're saying in this episode, Spock met Kirk here, Uhura met Kirk here, and then she's like, well, you should have joined us, and they pull back, and it's wonderfully reminiscent of things to come. So, all right, guys, comment below. Let me know what you thought of the episode. I would love to hear your opinions. But yeah, man, there you go. I'm super excited. All right, we'll talk again next week. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.